Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents A Dark Room in Glitterball City, Murder, Secrets, and Scandal in Old Louisville by David Dominé, narrated by Tom Parks. Prologue. Out on 4th Street, the asphalt shimmered under the light patter of rain. A crow cawed from its perch atop an ornate Flemish gable, then raised its wings and hopped into the air. Soaring across the grassy median and walkways of Fountain Court, it alighted seconds later on the steep parapet of the Victorian house on the other side. It shook out its wings and crowed again, unbothered by the drizzle. "You see how big that crow is?" Ramon raised his hand and pointed. "It's loud, that's for sure." I looked down at the mound of Courier journals that had collected at the front door. I was too lazy to reach down and pick one up, so I toed the pile with my shoe, scattering the newspapers to better see what had made the front page in the last week or two, or 3. There had to be at least 24 newspapers on the porch. You'd think the real estate agent would have cleared those away by now. Ramon walked over to a window and peered inside. Nothing says break and enter like a pile of newspapers outside the front door. I studied one of the headlines near my feet. Local activists were alleging media bias in the coverage of Nakia Williams, a transgender woman murdered by a group of men outside her Louisville apartment, and that the police had conducted a very lackluster investigation into the death. Another front page reported that police arrested 3 local teenagers for plotting to kill a fellow student over the weekend. A soft crackle of lightning flashed through silver-gray clouds hugging the distant treetops. Seconds later, a thunderclap rumbled. Across the road, a disheveled man stumbled down the sidewalk, an overstuffed garbage bag slung over his shoulder. He mumbled unintelligibly, but several identifiable curse words managed to punctuate the air. Ramon turned away from the window and stood at the edge of the porch, where rainwater dripped from the soffit. "It's really starting to look like a dump in there." He shook his head and exhaled loudly as the man continued his rantings. "I don't know why you'd want to move back to Old Louisville anyway." "What are you talking about? You suggested we come and look at this house in the first place, not me." Ramon crossed his arms, his gaze shifting again to the crow across the street. It shrieked and flew back to the rounded gable on the other side of the walking court. "I know how much you love Old Louisville," he grumbled. "I'm fine with living in the Highlands, definitely much quieter than Old Louisville." "You were happier down here, though, when we had the house on 3rd. "I was happy in that house, but the ballooning mortgage had become too much to handle in the end. And now we were talking about buying a home twice the size, over 9,000 square feet. They're not asking all that much for this place." He sidled up to me, using his foot to push one of the newspapers back onto the pile. A photo of David Cam, a local state trooper accused of murdering his wife and 2 children, took up most of the front page. He was preparing for a 3rd trial after the reversal of his 2nd conviction. "Well, let's take one last look since we're here," I said. Just then, the real estate agent rushed up the walkway, collapsing her umbrella under the cover of the porch. "Sorry I'm so late," she said. "Police had the 2 blocks north of Oak Street cordoned off. I heard they found a dead body in an alley dumpster." Ramon rolled his eyes and muttered, "Old Louisville." The agent jiggled a handful of keys and pushed open the front door. "Sorry, did you say something?" No, he didn't." I cut in front of Ramon and followed her through the leaded glass doors. The lights were off, and I paused to let my eyes adjust to the darkness. Despite the gloom, the foyer glowed. The parquet floors, the wooden moldings, the walnut wainscoting and elegant fireplace mantel, the elaborately carved newels and balusters, they all gleamed with the silver sheen of storm clouds sifting through stained glass windows. The agent hit a switch and a light bulb flashed, dull and yellow. She walked to a card table and folding chair in the corner and set down a clipboard. "Since you've been here already, I'll just let you wander around on your own while I do some paperwork. You can actually go inside the carriage house now." She removed a pen from the front pocket of her blazer and began scribbling. "Let me know if you need anything." "Thanks." I turned to go up the stairs, but stopped. "Say, I've heard lots of stories about this place. What do you know about the previous owner, the elderly lady who lived here?" When the woman didn't look up from her clipboard, I raised my voice. "Excuse me, the old nurse who had this house since the 60s, whatever happened to her?" Still, the real estate agent acted as if she hadn't heard. Ramon walked over and tapped the tabletop. "So, what about the old lady who lived here before, the nurse?" Without looking up, the agent stopped writing and cleared her throat. "Oh, she was old. She, died. She died." The scribbling resumed. "Oh, okay. Thanks." I turned away and exchanged glances with Ramon. He went up the grand staircase. That was weird. "I know." I followed. We entered the hallway on the second floor and poked our heads into sparsely furnished bedrooms, where peeling wallpaper and ceilings with water stains and cracked plaster greeted us. Dull brass numbers on the heavy wooden doors hinted at the days when the old mansion had served as a rooming house. The spaces on the third floor appeared to be in need of even more attention. A broken window pane let cool air stream into one room, and in another a huge, jagged fissure worked its way across the wall. As we descended the back stairs, Ramon shook his head and chuckled. "Looks even worse than it did last month. Hobo Central." "Let's check out the back and the carriage house," I said. "Then we can go." The kitchen looked a fright, as we already knew, with crumbling plaster ceilings and peeling wallpaper. Linoleum floors buckled with water damage. A cracked window over an old porcelain sink afforded a glimpse of the unkempt backyard. Next to the rear door hung a framed lithograph of a regal-looking gentleman from the late 1800s, probably from one of the old city newspapers. Before stepping outside, I paused to read the caption underneath. "Richard Robinson, a most honored and respected resident of the city. His unfaltering honesty, his kindly purposes, his recognition of the good in others, his broad sympathy and unbounded charity, these endeared him to all with whom he came in contact." "Who's that?" Ramon peered over my shoulder. "The original owner, maybe? A dry goods merchant." "I'm sure he'd love seeing what the house looks like today." "Whatever." I playfully pushed Ramon out the back door, and we stopped in the middle of an overgrown garden. The drizzle had turned into a fine mist, but angry storm clouds still roiled overhead. Weeds grew atop piles of dirt. Near the entrance to the carriage house stood a mound of rotting timber that I assumed had come from the interior. A grimy disco ball, still sparkly in patches, crowned the top of the heap. Across the back alley soared the roof of the Samuel Culbertson mansion. It faced 3rd Street, the old millionaire's row of Louisville, which a historian once described as a genteel area at the edge of a burgeoning city, reflecting the tastes and extravagances of the late Victorian era. The residents worked hard to live up to the magnificence of their houses, which were furnished as lavishly as social position required and wealth allowed. The glazed orange brick exterior of the mansion shimmered under a thin film of precipitation. When I moved to Louisville in 1993, I had spent my first few years in an apartment there. Now it operated as a bed and breakfast. Samuel Culbertson, president of Churchill Downs, called the 52-room Renaissance Revival construction home from 1897 to 1948. Credited with first draping a garland of red roses over the champion of the Kentucky Derby in 1932, Culbertson had sons who achieved fame in books written by local author Annie Fellows Johnston. The eponymous first volume would become famous when Shirley Temple tap-danced in the silver screen version with Bojangles' The Black Butler, the Little Colonel. "Hey," Ramon stooped to examine a soggy cardboard box next to the pile of boards. "Come look at this." Books and magazines spilled out. On one cover, an angry, ruler-wielding nun was spanking a bare-bottomed woman bent over her knee. Good Lord! I reached down and flipped several pages. Old porno magazines. All nuns and all women. Yuck! Not even the good kind of porn. Oh, my God. I stood up quickly and looked back at the house. What? Remember that night we saw all the nuns on the front porch? I widened my eyes. This is the place. Wait, that was this house? Yes, I remember now. It happened right across from the entrance to Fountain Court. On a balmy summer evening several years before, our friend Skippy had come over for dinner, and we'd taken the dogs for a walk after. As we strolled down the 1400 block of 4th Street, a strange sight awaited. A group of ancient nuns, perhaps a dozen of them, all in identical black and white habits, lined the porch of a large red-brick house. Stone-faced and silent, they stared out at the street as if they had been arranged for a group photograph. But there wasn't a photographer in sight. "Another reason why this house gives off such a strange vibe," Ramon laughed. "You don't want to live in an old building associated with nuns, do you?" "But I love nuns. They add character to a neighborhood." "The nuns in this box don't add the kind of character we're looking for." He rose and brushed off the front of his pants. "I wonder if there's such a thing as hobo porn." "Let's see if there's any in the carriage house." Against a wall rested another cardboard box chock full of erotic, sister-centric paperbacks and magazines. From the cover designs, they appeared to be from the 50s and 60s. Next to that box rested another, containing old copies of the Courier-Journal. One front page ran a story about the history of the Scripps National Spelling Bee, which traced its origins to Louisville in 1925. Ramon shook his head. "No hobos." "Who knew there was so much pulp fiction about nuns?" I said. "I wonder if it belonged to the old nurse, or one of her tenants. She had all kinds in here." Ramon didn't answer. Instead, he folded his arms across his chest as he took in the interior. Although someone had made a valiant attempt at making the coach house presentable, it still looked terrible. Boards covered most of the windows, and holes in the walls and ceiling revealed an assortment of wooden beams. Another disco ball sat in a far corner. "Someone sure loved glitter balls," I said. Ramon remained silent. "So, what do you think?" "It needs a lot of work, but if you want to, let's do it." He uncrossed his arms, ambled to the door, and looked out. "But if we move back, you need to learn how to say no every once in a while. You let people take advantage of you. All the committees and boards you're on, people traipsing through the house for the holiday tours, being tour guide and all the money going to everyone but you." He looked over his shoulder at me. "Writing a cookbook for free for the neighborhood, even though they managed to come up with $15,000 for the photographer. Blah, blah, blah." I nudged him over the threshold and into the backyard. A loud squawk tore the air, and we looked up. An inky black bird had perched atop a gutter, where it peered down at us. Just then my cell phone chittered. I looked down to see a text from my brother. "Who's that?" "My brother Paul, probably looking for money again." "He's the biggest hobo of all." Ramon shook his head as we continued to the back of the house. Then he pointed. "That's not the same crow, is it?" "I don't know. They're supposed to be really smart. Maybe it's following us. So what do you want to do? Let's check out the basement before we go. Maybe we can get in through the side door. There's something creepy about it. Dungeon-like. Did you see that one room full of junk? The one with the dirt floor and the shelves? It looks like an old wine cellar. I headed back to the house. I'd love to have a wine cellar. That's not what I meant. Do you want the place or not? I don't know. It's up to you. We better decide fast, said Ramon, hurrying to catch up. The agent said there's a guy moving back from Chicago who's coming to look at it in a few minutes, and he's serious. Wants to turn it into a bed and breakfast. And I don't think she's just making it up. I stopped and gazed up. I don't know. Hugging myself for warmth, I studied the back of the enormous house. I kind of like where we are now. Thunder clapped overhead, and the soft patter of raindrops followed. I looked at Ramon. You decide, hobo, he said. Part 1. Chapter 1. Get your cash today. Little John's, near Churchill Downs racetrack, attracted tourists from all over the world. In a presidential tone and tailored suit, the diminutive Filipino pawnbroker explained that gold was selling at an awesome $1,500 an ounce, but not for long. Now was the time to sell your unwanted jewelry, he insisted. In the breakfast room, I popped the last bite of toasted onion bagel into my mouth before grabbing the remote. Behind Little John, a cop, a construction worker, a cowboy, and a Native American clumsily danced and sang to the melody of the disco classic YMCA by the Village People. We're going to Little John's today, to take our jewelry in and get our cash today. You will get a good deal, and you get paid for real, so bring it to Little John. The train wreck appeal of the commercial's bad singing and acting had earned its originator cult status. I started to turn off the TV and return to my writing when a local news flash broke onto the screen. A reporter stood in front of a huge, somewhat run-down brick house where yellow crime scene tape cordoned off the front yard. Behind her, a pair of policemen hulked at the front door. Two men in hazmat suits jostled a blue-gray rubber storage bin down the walkway and into a waiting vehicle at the curb. Curious passers-by looked on from the other side of the lawn as an early morning June breeze rustled the leaves on a nearby sycamore. The wind picked up and drowned out the reporter's words for a moment, but then it died down, and her voice rose. An LMPD spokesperson said they discovered the body early this morning in what appeared to be a wine cellar of this dilapidated mansion in Old Louisville. She turned to point at the facade of the building. Old Louisville, the preservation district with hundreds of Victorian mansions just south of the downtown area, the neighborhood where Ramon and I had lived until a few years before. I stared at the screen, and something slowly dawned on me. This was the house we had considered buying, the house with the wine cellar, 1435 South 4th Street. The Richard Robinson place, with its impressive parquet floors and a dozen bedrooms, sat across from the entrance to one of Louisville's famed walking courts, the pedestrian-only thoroughfares designed to add a bit of London flair when planners laid out the neighborhood. We had lived right around the corner, on 3rd Street. The cellar didn't want all that much for the mansion, but it needed so much work. Rotting wood dangled from the eaves and cornices. The wreck of a carriage house and the bombed-out kitchen presented a challenge I welcomed, but in the end, we decided to stay in Louisville's Highlands neighborhood. It took just 10 minutes to walk from my front door to my students at Bellarmine University, after all. As far as I knew, the house had remained unoccupied, abandoned, but the reporter made it clear the mansion indeed had residents. Authorities had taken a couple into custody and charged the 2 men with murder. Things had started the previous night, when police arrived at the residence after a 911 call about a domestic disturbance. 1 man had been arrested, and the police quickly heard grumblings about a body buried in the basement. The other had been taken in for questioning after police dug a rubber storage bin out of the dirt floor and sent its gruesome contents to the coroner. What had started out as an apparent lovers' quarrel had quickly and unexpectedly led to the discovery of a homicide. The reporter interviewed a neighbor, who, shaking her head, looked uneasily over her shoulder at the looming house. "I always knew there was something weird about this place," she confided in a low tone. "It always gave off creepy vibes." Creepy, for sure. Unsettling stories abounded about the old house. Whether or not they could be substantiated was another thing. People claimed early occupants had died under mysterious circumstances, and a drug addict had attacked and killed someone in the house. A blind tiger had attracted crowds during the Roaring Twenties, and in the 70s a secret society used to meet in the house. Rumors claimed a sadistic doctor once practiced there, and that, for a time, when the house sat abandoned, a satanic cult had carried out rituals in the cellar of the mansion. A chill worked its way up my spine. I wondered if strange rites had played out in the same part of the basement where they had unearthed the body on the news, in that little dark room. From my experience as a researcher and writer of true crime and paranormal stories, I knew claims involving satanic cults usually proved to be exaggerated, if not altogether false. Satanic panic. True or not, I understood how such stories could arise from that basement. Cellars of old houses were inherently frightening, but the basement at the old Richard Robinson place fell in a category all its own. When I had walked through it 2 years before, a feeling of oppression pervaded the dimly lit interiors and seeped from the bare stone and brick walls. The layout was dizzying, even disconcerting. Instead of one large open space, the underground chambers of the mansion comprised a confusing warren of smallish rooms. That particular basement would have been an ideal location to film a horror flick. On another local channel, the screen cut to the mugshots of 2 guys. Both looked to be in their 30s. The one on the left had spiky brown hair, narrow eyes, and prominent ears. A caption identified the clean-shaven individual as Jeffrey Mundt. Stubble and the hint of a soul patch covered the other's chin, and his hairline receded at his temples. He looked away from the camera and wore something of a scowl. White block letters on a blue background identified him as Joseph Banis. Staring at the images, I listened as the newswoman said their names and revealed them as the 2 men arrested by police earlier that morning. Slowly, a flicker of recognition registered somewhere, and I squinted to better see their faces. I must have seen them in the neighborhood, or did I know them from somewhere else? On the coffee table, my cell phone started to vibrate. Ramon, calling from work. "Are you watching the news?" he said. "The house in Old Louisville, the one on 4th Street? I'm so glad we didn't buy it." He snorted softly. "And you saw who they arrested, right?" "I just saw their names now, Mundt and Banis. Do we know them? They look so familiar." "Seriously?" Ramon stifled a laugh. "You don't recognize them? You're such a hobo." "I do, but I'm not sure from where." "The one was the bartender at Q, the other was his boyfriend, the really stuck-up one who moved back here from Chicago, remember?" My breath caught in my throat. "That's right." It all came back to me. At the club, everyone called Joseph Banis Joey, the so-called bad boy from a wealthy family. He had drug problems and had been to prison numerous times. Usually, when we saw him behind the bar fixing drinks, He wore only a pair of ratty jeans held up by a silver-studded belt. Temporary tattoos and colorful phosphorescent body paint often adorned his sinewy upper torso. Bright pinks, yellows, and greens. One evening he had sported a stunning blue mohawk. Everyone called his boyfriend Jeff or Jace, but we had never had any direct interaction with him. Except for that rainy morning when Jeffrey Mundt arrived for his appointment with the real estate agent at 1435 South 4th Street. Rushing up the front steps, he had brushed by without so much as a nod of the head as we returned to the sidewalk out front. He had bought the old Robinson place after all. The only other time we had seen him came one morning while waiting for a table at a popular St. Matthew's breakfast place, where he stood ahead of us in the line. "Top of the morning to you," he'd cry out whenever he saw anybody who warranted greeting. "God, what a cheeseball," I had muttered under my breath. "They know the name of the body yet?" Ramon asked. "I don't think so. They believe it might have been drug-related." Just what Old Louisville needs, another dead body. Glad we stayed in the Highlands. Nobody gets a break down there. I walked into the kitchen for another bagel. Many viewed Old Louisville as the red-headed stepchild of the city. Although people moved in from all over to restore once-neglected mansions and charming Victorian cottages, some still considered it a bad part of town. 30 or 40 years before, that might have been a valid claim. But since the 1970s, when residents fought to have the 40-some square blocks immediately south of the downtown area declared a historic preservation district, the neighborhood had seen an upswing. Nationwide, architects and historians acclaimed the impressive collection of antique homes. Nonetheless, old-timers viewed Old Louisville as a bohemian, if somewhat seedy enclave, where students mixed with upwardly mobile gay couples, intellectuals, and those looking to escape the cookie-cutter life of suburbia. Every time they took a step forward, they took 2 steps back in Old Louisville. Despite the grandeur and opulence found in the core of the neighborhood, where old-growth trees shaded stunning sections of Millionaire's Row, and gas lamps evoked Victorian charm on secluded St. James Court, residents still had to exercise caution on certain blocks after dark. Ramon and I knew this firsthand. The 6-bedroom 1890s house we restored sat near the infamous corner of 4th and Oak, or, as the locals called it, 4th and Crazy, and we were well acquainted with the prostitutes, drug dealers, and panhandlers who helped cast Old Louisville in an unfavorable light. Every now and then the news reported a random shooting, stabbing, or mugging, and this didn't help either. Now they had found a body in a basement. "You know, that storage bin wasn't very big," said Ramon. "They must have chopped him up to fit inside." "Gross." Another shudder crept up my spine. "Do they know it was a he?" "That's what they're saying. Gotta run. Bye." I switched to another local station. 2 reporters at a sleek desk discussed the body in the basement and the Old Louisville mansion. A large monitor showed a straight-on shot of the imposing brick residence, then switched to a split screen with the faces of the suspects. I studied the images. The photo of Mundt appeared to be the same as the one shown on the previous channel, but Banis looked different. This time he stared straight at the camera, but sculpted eyebrows added to the severity of his gaze. He was clean-shaven, save for a thin strip of beard that ran from below his lower lip down across his chin. Despite the circumstances, both looked relatively normal. Granted, Joseph Banis had that hard edge, but Jeffrey Mundt appeared to be your run-of-the-mill 30-something-year-old. What between them had led to a body in the basement? An accident, or something darker? Questions swam in my head, but I reminded myself the only thing known for certain was that they had found a corpse in the basement of the house at 1435 South 4th Street, and that Jeffrey Mundt and Joseph Banis.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?